Remember how I talked about the way that I've observed that they curate things on YouTube? If you'll recall, I made that a topic of a couple of videos of mine. Well, type in Ted Olson 9/11 interview as I did. First thing that comes up is nothing having to do with 9/11. Redeeming the Dream, Ted Olson, Lady Olson, and but I'm not going to get into the whole Lady Olson, Barbara Olson thing. That's just a little too weird for me. But who knows? Who knows? Anyway, so the second video that comes up, and this is there's a few more. You scroll down, you'd think that because this was such a watershed moment, and this was a power couple, and it was such a dramatic thing where Ted Olson, the Solicitor General of the United States, lost his wife, his beautiful blonde, outspoken conservative firebrand pundit wife on one of the planes that was hijacked on 9/11 that crashed into the Pentagon, allegedly. You'd think that there'd be video after video after video about this, but no, there isn't. Most of them are about Ted Olson talking about gay marriage because he became a gay marriage advocate. This conservative Republican Bush guy, which I'll show you a little bit more about in a minute. But so then there's the Barbara Walters interview, which I covered in a prior video. But this is not the Barbara Walters video, which was posted by ABC or broadcast by ABC. You don't see ABC broadcasting this video on YouTube, making this video available on YouTube. Instead, it was, they found some video footage of it, and some consensus 9/11 lawyers committee for 9/11 inquiries, some 9/11 revisionist group is putting up these videos. So then you have a bunch of stuff that's not related at all, scrolling down further and further, and a lot of stuff about the gay marriage thing with Ted Olson and David Boyce, this other DC attorney reptilian. But anyway, that's the first point I want to make, is how this has been curated, and how this was if YouTube were around in 2001 and you typed in Ted Olson 9/11 interview, then you would just get blitzed with video after video after video from official, like network source after network source, like ABC, CNN, and each video would have millions and millions of views. But all of those have been taken down by the network people, by the mainstream media people. And the only reason these videos still remain on YouTube is because they've been put back up by 9/11 revisionists. Now, one exception to this rule is this one. This, which we're about to take a look at. And again, I will leave the link below to this interview. Let me click on it first.
Ted, I know it's very difficult, but what was Barbara Olson's last words to you? And did you learn what were the last moments?
Okay, first of all, just to give some context, this is the Hudson Society, which is, I think, a DC think tank. And the people you see on stage, I don't know who this nebbishy interviewer guy is, but this is David Boyce, who is this also attorney, DC attorney bigwig. He was the one who was fronting for Gore in Bush versus Gore. Well, Ted Olson was fronting for Bush in Bush versus Gore. And Boyce has been, a high-profile attorney, just like Olson is. and they both teamed up to help get gay marriage to make gay marriage legal, and that's, I think, what this whole press conference is about, which was back in the date is August 8th, 2014. Okay, so this is several years later. This is the only other time where Ted Olson is talking. He's asked this question in this obviously staged way by, this master of ceremonies guy, whoever he is. He lobs him this softball question. Ted is obviously expecting it. He's ready for it. Otherwise, if he just got blindsided with this question, it would not be, his reaction would not be what it is. But let's see what Ted has to say this time around when he's asked this question about his alleged final moments with his talking to his wife on the phone. Now, keep in mind also, this is several years after it was demonstrated that no phone call was made by Barbara Olson to Ted Olson. First of all, you can't call somebody on the ground from 2 miles up in the sky. It can't be done on a cell phone. Second of all, there were no airplane phones on this plane that Barbara Olson was allegedly flying on. So, in other words, this whole story, which Ted Olson told immediately after September 11th, he told to Barbara Walters, he told it to Larry King, was a lie. But here it is 13 years after that, and he's being asked again to rehash this lie. This thing that has been demonstrated to be a lie by the investigating bodies who looked at the phone records and found that Barbara Olson did not call her husband or anybody from the plane. All right, so let's see how this proceeds from here.
For what happened on American Airlines Flight 77?
Yeah, it's very difficult, even today, to talk about. I did, my daughter's here tonight, and she lives down next to the World Trade Center, where the World Trade Center was, and I visited for the first time the museum. And for anyone in America to...
First of all, this may just be me, but I cannot handle this look of rehearsed, this is such a somber moment, and I'm looking properly somber. God, I fucking hate lawyers. Hate them. Go on.
To relive even this many years later, the pictures and the thoughts and the horror of 9/11, what happened in New York and what happened in Pennsylvania, what happened in Washington and the Pentagon, is very, very difficult. The magnitude of it seems to have dissipated a little bit because time does that for us. But when you think about it and look at the awful tangled wreckage and those destroyed fire trucks that those...
Okay, now note this, please. And again, if you want to watch the video uninterrupted, just go to my link. But please don't bitch about me interrupting the interview, because that's what this video is all about. It's about me giving my 2 cents. Note that the question that was put to Ted Olson was about how difficult is it still difficult to think about that day when you talked to your wife on the plane that was about to crash into the Pentagon. Note how Ted spins this immediately to talking about, well, it is very difficult, and then he talks about all this general stuff like, yeah, it was a traumatic day for America, and there was wreckage in New York, wreckage in D.C., wreckage in rural Pennsylvania, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and twisted fire trucks and bodies, and and all of this. So immediately he takes this personal question, this thing that even 13 years later he ought to be, it ought to be striking him on some kind of personal level. Here again, we see this this almost dispassionate way of answering, the same kind of manner with which he answered Barbara Walters' question just 3 days after this alleged incident. This ability to compartmentalize, this is a reptilian trait. And now, when I say reptilian, I'm not saying that I think that these two and their like are actual reptilians with reptilian DNA. It's a metaphor for a certain type of personality, which seems to predominate and thrive around the levers of power. Okay, so first thing I wanted to point that out was that.
Men were wearing, look at the stairs that people were getting out, and
Again, he's
all
just-
of those things.
he's just-
very, very difficult.
Going on and on about it was very difficult, very difficult. This should be an intensely personal question for him. He should, if his answer were authentic, he shouldn't be thinking, it was a terrible day for America, and doing all this politician, this lame kind of crap about, there was so much devastation, and it was a day of reckoning for all of us, and all this pompous crap. He should be immediately focusing in on, I talked to my wife on the phone minutes before she died horribly because terrorists hijacked the plane she was on, and it was my birthday. This should be a really personal thing for him, and it's not.
But it's something that we need to do again and again to remind ourselves to make sure that we never forget.
Oh, shut up!
Barbara was
Okay, now he's finally talking about his wife.
Changed her flight because that September 11, unfortunately, was my birthday, and so she changed her flight to be there the night before, and so she got on this flight from Dulles Airport to Los Angeles.
So sad,
She was
so
going to be
sad.
on the Bill Maher show that night. And when the news came in, I was in the Justice Department, the Solicitor General's office. My secretary rushed in, and we turned on the television set, and we saw the film that was coming in over the...
My secretary rushed in. It's just lame, stupid details. I don't know. So then...
the networks of the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center, and then...
So, okay, that's another thing other people have talked about. He says talks about the networks showing the first plane. None of the networks showed the first plane, but he talks about seeing the first plane crash. Bush talked about it. Rumsfeld apparently talked about it. Where are all of these DC bigwigs getting this feed where they're seeing the first quote-unquote plane crash into the World Trade Center? That's something I would like to know. Anyway.
The second, and I can't remember the exact sequence, but somewhere around 9:15 or something like that, my secretary rushed in and said, Barbara's on the phone.
Again, his secretary rushes. His secretary is just rushing around, turning on the TV, rushing in, saying, "Your wife's on the phone. Your wife's on the phone." It's just so. I don't know if it's like. I'm thinking if I were his writer, I would do a little better than this. But anyway.
I don't know how Barbara managed to make her cell phone work or make the cell phones.
She didn't.
You could make phone calls, but they were up in the air, and she
didn't make. See, he has to say that now. I don't know how she made it work, but the evidence shows she didn't make it work. The evidence shows there were no phone calls made from her phone. But anyway, he continues.
I had worried as soon as I saw this tragedy unfolding that maybe Barbara's flight was one of the ones that had been flown into the World Trade Center. And so when my secretary said she was on the phone,
he says that so dispassionately, just like I was worried that she might be on one of those planes that that crashed into the World Trade Center. Like, he says it so matter-of-factly, so dispassionately. Again, who talks like this? Who talks like this? You know, it's like, we have to understand and acknowledge that this is not normal human behavior to talk this way about something that should be so deeply traumatizing. And again, I wouldn't feel so free speaking my mind about this if it were not demonstrably true that what he's saying here is a lie, because he never talked to his wife on that day. It didn't happen.
Oh my God, Barbara's okay. That isn't what's happening. And then she got on the phone and she told me that their plane had been hijacked and that all the passengers had been moved to the back of the airplane. And she asked me what should I do, or what can I do? Barbara's a fighter, and she was not going to go easily. And I asked her a little bit about what she sensed of where that airplane was, where it was going. And the phone was cut off, and then a short while later, she somehow managed to get through again, calling collect to the Justice Department of the United States. And
Wait.
Get through to my office. That's the kind of...
Wait, what? She called the second time collect? That's what he's going with now? 13 years later? He didn't say that to Barbara Walters. The second time the call was placed, does he think that by saying it was a collect call, that's somehow, I think that's just an effort to muddy the waters and say, well, maybe it was from the airplane phone, even though the airplane phones didn't work on this plane. That has been shown, that has been proven. And even though Barbara Olson did not make any cell phone calls from the plane, she couldn't have made them anyway from that height, but then neither could have all of the other supposed people who called in on cell phones, which is just a big problem with the 9/11 OS, the official story. But that he's throwing in this whole, she called the Justice Department collect. So who picked up at the Justice Department and said, yes, we will accept the charges. We will accept the charges from this cell phone of the wife of the Solicitor General who's calling us from an impossible height. God, these people.
A resourceful person she was, and we had
so resourceful to call collect.
I had to tell her what I already knew, which is the two airplanes had been crashed into the World Trade Center. So I had to tell her what she obviously was able to process, what was in the cards for her. So it was very difficult. The conversation.
And look at him; he's
short.
like,
I wrote
I'm
a
so
piece
somber.
about this afterwards, about how Barbara was a quintessential American, a blonde Catholic girl that was raised in Texas that became a professional ballerina for a while.
Notice how he's changing the subject now. He's like, and I wrote later about how she was the quintessential American girl. Like, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything? You weren't, the question was to recount his memories from that day. He should be super hyper focused on these last moments and what they meant to him, and he should be. I'm not saying he has to be blubbering, and you can be stoic, but still, there still has to be some kind of evident, bank of emotion behind the stoicism, even if you are the strong, silent type. But here he's just going off. The first thing he did was talk about all this general crap about, yes, it was a terrible day for America, and there were all these terrible sights that greeted all of our eyes that day, and like he's just trying to pander. And now, instead of just after he flings in this whopper about her calling the Justice Department collect the second time. Then he just starts talking about, oh yeah, she was the quintessential American girl, blah, blah, blah.
While then paid her way through a Jewish law school here in New York, and Cardozo, predominantly Jewish, and a sort of a right-wing Republican at a left-wing school and so forth. But,
a little smile there from boys.
A best-selling author and a commentator and that sort of thing. She was a quintessential American, taking advantage of the opportunities. When I said right-wing, I don't really mean that, but she thought
look at this guy.
Or opinionated. She thought opinionated was a good thing.
He's just pandering. He's pandering to his audience. He said, oops, I called her right-wing. But this audience is a bunch of liberals who are pro-gay marriage. So let me just rephrase what I said a moment ago. She wasn't right-wing. She was opinionated. And she thought that was a good thing, to be opinionated. God, what a weasel. I mean, I'm at a loss for words right now. These kinds of moments, these kinds of interviews are very illuminating, but they also, to me, just demonstrate the gulf that exists between normal human behavior and the type of behavior that's exhibited by the kind of people who manage to gravitate to power. And I'm thankful that these interviews exist because they expose something about, the void that lurks at the heart of these kinds of people. Look at that shit-eating grin. I hate this guy. Fuck you, boys. Nothing personal. You're just a lawyer. You're just a DC reptilian attorney. The two of you and Dershowitz are like three peas in a pod. Fuck all you guys.